Up next, if you've happened to notice some corn plant injury over the past few weeks, you may want to be on the lookout for stalk borer in your fields. This pest typically feeds on leaves and then will tunnel into stalks. Eventually, this loss could lead to yield loss. Market Journal's Mike Straub recently caught up with extension entomologist Robert Wright to get some of his tips on mitigation strategies.
With corn going strong, it is time to start scouting for stalk borer. These pests can be found in any part of the state. However, eastern Nebraska is at greater risk.
The stalk borer can be found statewide. It's probably historically been more of a problem in the eastern part of the state, but it could be anywhere.
With an unusual life cycle, stalk borer tend to lay eggs over the winter. They begin their life cycle on the border of the fields and move into the fields as they get bigger.
They typically lay eggs on the field border, particularly like if you have a brome grass border or grass borders along the terraces or something. That's where they'll lay eggs. They'll lay the eggs over winter, and they've been hatching for a while now. The thing that's sort of unusual, they feed mostly in grasses, but they can feed on a wide variety of the other plants as well. The thing that's unusual, as they hatch out in the spring, typically the caterpillars will start feeding in brome grass or some other border grass. And as the caterpillar gets too big to stay inside that smaller plant, it starts moving around to find a better host. And that's when it can infest corn and other crops. And so we have enough degree days now that it's at least in southeast Nebraska, it's getting to the point where it might start entering into cornfields. And so we want people to scout and look for injury. And if this high enough on the field borders, typically, it may be time to treat.
Stalk borer feed at the base of a plant. When scouting, you should be looking for stunted plants or plants with dead growing points.
Okay, typically, the thing to look for would be on field borders. If there's stunted plants or plants with a dead growing point or defoliation to the leaf. The caterpillar feeds in the base of the plant typically. Sometimes they can burrow down into the whorl, but they'll damage the growing point of the plant or the leaves as they come out. So if you see some of those symptoms on the edge of the field, you can try to pull out the whorl or dissect the plant.
Depending on the growth stage of a crop, having stalk borer could cause yield loss, especially in younger plants.
So typically we see yield loss with an infestation, mostly on field borders. They can kill plants depends on the growth stage of the corn that they attack. Younger plants are more likely to be damaged more severely. And so one management practice, if you're in an area that has a lot of stalk borer in the future, early planting can help so that the plants are bigger at the time the larvae are moving and they're less likely to cause economic damage. And we have economic thresholds in terms of whether or not it's going to pay to treat, and that varies with crop growth stage as well as the number of caterpillars. And so again, if with smaller plants, they're likely to have economic damage. So later planted fields would be more at risk than earlier planted fields.
Stalk borer isn't as much of a widespread problem as other soil insects such as corn rootworm. It is a good idea that you be scouting for them this time of year, especially if you've had stalk borer in the past or have fields with grassy borders.
Well, this isn't typically a real widespread pest like corn rootworm or some of the other major corn pests, but in areas, particularly if you have fields with either grassy borders or have a history of common stalk borer, it's something to scout for at this time of the year. And you may be able to get by with just a border treatment because they're most likely going to be heaviest in the border. The current BTs don't have much activity. BT corns don't have much activity against common stalk borer, so that's not a helpful management option. But foliar insecticides, when needed, can be very effective in reducing injury. Thing I'd point out also is that because the degree days accumulate at different rates in different parts of the state, right now in southeast Nebraska is when you really should be out checking field borders. And in the next couple of weeks, that's going to occur other parts of the state as we go further west and north degree days accumulate a little later. And there's degree day data available through the Nebraska State Climate Office, and again, we link to that in our Crop Watch article, so you can look up the current degree day information and what you should be doing based on the degree day accumulations in your area.
If you think you might have a stalk borer infestation, stunted plants and dead growing points are two good indications. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Mike Straub.